Ladies and gentlemen, I recorded with Dr. Robert M. Price today, and I thought, okay, this was a wonderful live. We went for like 2.5 hours. A lot of amazing questions were answered, and I recorded it using my camera on the side. However, somehow I must have accidentally deleted my live today that I did with Dr. Price. I'm not sure how, so you guys might be wondering, where is the video that was notified earlier? I'm blaming myself and saying maybe when it was open in my pocket, somehow I accidentally deleted the video. So I've launched this video today. I was going to early release it on Patreon for all those who are Patreon supporters of MythVision, but I'm going to make it public for everybody right out the gate. I hope everyone who's watching this enjoys this. It's a long video. Lots of great content gets covered in here, and I appreciate everybody who helps support us here at MythVision Podcast. If you don't know or you aren't already a patron, please go down in the description and join it. Check it out. I've got hundreds of videos that you have no access to on YouTube, all on Patreon. Love you guys. Because we're going live, Dr. Bob, and this is really, really up on your grill right now. I mean, they are checking you out way up on your face. Okay, I'm trying to get this zoomed up here. Okay. I hope it's live and everybody can hear me. So, yeah, we've got Dr. Bobby Boucher. I always use the water boy. You never even watched it, have you?
No.
You would so get what I'm saying if you watched the water boy, Dr. Price. Anyways, yeah, I'm gonna read that book, but I was looking at the pages. Those books, the book's pages are huge. I'm talking about like, you know, when I read a page, it's like easy read. One page is like 3 on a regular book that you usually read.
Tiny print or big book?
Kind of smaller print, but not too small. I'm just saying there's a lot of words. Mm-hmm. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to MythVision Podcast. I'm hanging out with Dr. Bob, and we're in his, where are we?
Selma, North Carolina.
Yes.
Pit of Hell.
Pit of Hell. That's what I was actually looking for. I wasn't going to bite on any of the other stuff.
My daughter Victoria would say that the same thing.
Oh yeah, she probably would. Everyone. So welcome in. Someone says praise Dr. Bob. It is live. I can hear you. Scott Duke, Neil Martin. It's on. I cannot speak. I think it's German. I'm not sure. Bobby Boucher. Someone says you're. Okay, good evening, everyone. Most epic. What is up, everybody? Hit that like button. We're hanging out with Dr. Bob. And today we did recordings. I think we done, 12, 13 recordings?
Yeah.
Probably, maybe more. Mm. It was really, really fun. Sounds and looks getting here. Greetings. Watching from Tuscaloosa, Alabama. All right, awesome. We are catching up. Dr. Bob, tell us about this book real quick as people...
Yeah, this is a collection of essays of mine published by McNair Price. It's available on Amazon. And I just thought I'd read you some titles and give you some idea what this is about. It's called Reinterpreting the New Testament. Don't be so sure you know what it means. The variety of occasions in which I've delivered these or published them in journals and all that. The first one is A Political Jesus. Where did he stand? Can he be proof texted on behalf of any modern politics? This is the one that got me booted out of Johnnie Colemon Seminary. And then there's Apocryphal Addenda, More Lost Gospels novels, which is kind of a little appendix to my book, Secret Scrolls, Revelations from the Lost Gospel novels, where I deal with these fascinating, loads of fun fictions about the discovery of the body of Jesus or of a lost gospel or both that threatened to blow the lid off of Christianity. And my goal in these extended review essays is to say, what does some writer think would be fatal for Christianity? Would it be, like the whole thing with Dan Brown? If Jesus was married, that's the end of the whole thing. Get out of here. And it's fun to see what people think of as Christian origins and gospel origins when they don't know what the heck they're talking about. Then there's an old paper I did Paul think of the pre-incarnate Christ as God? Which is not all that clear, and there's a lot of debate over that. Then the austerity gospel of Gordon Fee. He's a remarkable man. He was a professor of mine at Gordon Conwell Seminary, a great scholar, very conservative in some ways. One of the maximal conservatives James Barr talked about, learned a lot from him, and he was really an opponent of the prosperity gospel of TV evangelists. I am too, but I think he kind of goes too far in the other direction, and so this is an evaluation of the New Testament teaching on the subject.
Real quick, Bieber, yeah, if you wanted a super chat, I could try and keep an eye out on your question. If you want to write it in like a couple different things, and whenever Dr. Bob's done introducing his book, I can get to it.
Oh, okay. Skepticism and Historical Method. I gave this at a Free Thinkers conference a few years back. Skepticism is absolutely basic to historical inquiry. Then the Synoptic Apocalypse and the Son of Man. What does it actually teach about Jesus? Is he supposed to be the Son of Man, etc.? Then there's one, The Retreat from Radical Prayer, the New Testament Evolution, where I argue that all of the many passages that seem to offer a blank check for answered prayer have hidden within them qualifiers which undermine any confidence in prayer.
Just so everybody knows, we actually recorded in high definition him responding to this. It's good that you're letting the live audience know. Let them see the title again, because they barely saw the title. This is Dr. Bob's book. Yeah, there you go. So this is Dr. Bob's book, and he's like, people aren't aware of this book that much, so you really should get this book on Amazon and check it out. He's already gone over a lot of the top subject matter in his topics in high definition, which will be, all these videos will be released on Patreon early. But yeah, no, go ahead. I just wanted them to know though that I think it's interesting. You talk about the Son of Man. Was Jesus talking about himself?
Not clear.
Yeah, and this is interesting because it makes you wonder, did someone conflate this idea, or what's going on? So it's really got me wondering what the heck is up with this. And someone was asking about the gods behind me there, Dr. Bob. Like here, Mrs. Said, Dr. Price, in the background I see 5 Kemet deities and 2 Sanatan Dharma deities. Did you know those 2 cultures used to be connected by the silk trade route?
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense. Yeah, there's a lot of interchange in the ancient world from India on into North Africa, partly because of Alexander the Great. And he took the opportunity to spread Hellenistic language and culture and really change the world. And that's enough to explain all the syncretism that critical scholars posit as having happened in the New Testament. This idea that Jews, for instance, kept their belief hermetically sealed off from outside influences, that's just ludicrous. So I guess I kind of feel that way too. Yeah, we got, I believe he is Maitreya Buddha, the Buddha of the future. That's Ganesha, the son of Shiva. There is Anubis, the opener of the way to the afterlife. Tutankhamun, the king. Osiris, the king of the gods. Isis, his bride and queen, next to him. And then we've got Thoth, the messenger of the gods. And this is Sarasvati, the goddess of culture and learning in ancient India. And above her, though you probably can't see him, is H.P. Lovecraft. And then the guy from the Rush album. And over there, a Garuda bird who's part of Indian mythology, and the great Socrates.
You didn't count me. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, you were sitting on the mantle a minute ago, but
that's true. That's true. Now, That's interesting. They said beautiful statues. I appreciate that. He said he's going to prepare something. Michael Newham says, Dr. Price, do you have an opinion of H.P. Blavatsky?
She was I did an article about Joseph Smith called Joseph Smith, Liar, Lunatic, or Lord, where I said, yeah, he does appear to have been a faker and a hoaxer, but that doesn't exclude his being an actual religious founder. And I compared him with several other people, including Madame Blavatsky. She was such a charlatan. She would have messages from the ascended masters floating down from the vents in the ceiling on folded pieces of paper. I mean, that's just the crudest stunt. And yet, you read her books, she was amazingly learned and a real character. So I don't know what to make of these people, but I think she was an important person with a lot of interesting stuff to say. I don't believe it. I mean, she was basically sort of Hindu and Buddhist with a little Gnosticism and other stuff thrown in, which is not hard to do. I mean, there are various important similarities. But yeah, was she a faker and a hoaxer? Yeah, but it was part of the shtick. It's a funny thing. Some people are not easily categorizable.
Interesting. Thank you, Dr. Bob. That's kind of funny hearing, because I kind of just barely scratched the surface on learning anything about her. And just the weird theosophy stuff that people talk about. Yeah. Interesting. Let's see. Someone says, surprise, faithful theology. These streams with Dr. Bob are brilliant. Reverend Taco says, oh, theosophy is so wacky. The concepts are so wacky. I used to be a student of this idea. What were you? Did you ever really study into that a lot, or you just know? I mean, you did, like we talked about earlier.
I did read a good bit on theosophy and its rivals and split-offs like anthroposophy and the Great I Am movement, and the Summit Lighthouse with Elizabeth Clare Prophet, and they this is back in about 81 or 82. I just thought, here are modern Gnostic-type religions, and they're not the ones you usually hear most about, and I found them just so intriguing. Nothing I believe in, but that's not really what's intriguing to me about them. It's these elaborate, sacred cosmoses of the imagination. Which is, in a sense, what all philosophy and theology is. So,
interesting. Yeah.
Fan.
That's very interesting. Let's see. Talking of philosophy, any opinion on Krishnamurti?
Krishnamurti, oh yes, it means the form of Krishna. He was a protege of Blavatsky and I think Henry Steele Olcott, another big theosophist. They promoted him as the great world teacher, like he would be the next Jesus or Buddha. And he eventually, still, I guess an adolescent, said he wanted no part of it. And yet he did become a world-known guru. And lots of Krishnamurti's books are out there, and a lot of people think highly of him, but he did split off, kind of like the Buddha leaving the monks and ascetics to strike out on his own.
Huh. Interesting. Castle Crusher says, Scientific American said her writings were concocted for an occult audience. I wouldn't be surprised.
Well, what does that mean?
Probably Blavatsky, I suspect.
But is that a criticism?
I guess. I don't know.
Because she certainly, I don't believe she's been shown to have plagiarized anything. She just synthesized all manner of esoteric doctrines in the same sort of way that the Golden Dawn did, though it wasn't the same recipe. but they combine the Kabbalah, astrology, the Grail, legends, all kinds of neat stuff. And I think it was a real achievement. Plus, Theosophy was a huge influence on some of the fantasy fiction that I love, especially H.P. Lovecraft and Edgar Rice Burroughs. And the John Carter of Mars stuff has a whole lot to do with Theosophy. The green Tharks, if you know your Burroughs, or if you've seen the John Carter movie, with 4 arms, these giant warriors, they're based on the blue-skinned Ramoahal titans of The Secret Doctrine by Blavatsky, and a bunch of things like that. So Fritz Leiber pointed this out in a great essay called John Carter, Sword of Theosophy. And so there was wide influence. Lynn Carter borrowed stuff from them, and it was a new modern mythology that is very intriguing.
Interesting. Thank you, Dr. Bob. Okay, so got a question, super chat here. Socialist, does Dr. Bob believe in the reliability to the claims of pre-Columbian transatlantic voyages to America besides the Vikings in the year 1000?
Nothing would surprise me. To me, it's just a question of, is there archaeological evidence? And apparently some of that is pretty ambiguous. I know there was a book called America BC, where there are examples given of what the authors say are scratchings on flat stones that seem to be monuments in the Punic language of Carthage and all that. But others say you're just really seeing what you want to see there. It's not clear enough. Well, I've never seen them and have no basis for an opinion, but nothing would surprise me.
Thank you for that super chat, my friend. I appreciate the love. Let me go back up here. Do you have an opinion? CPO fast forwards does Dr. Bob have an opinion on how the Falasha Jews came to exist? And just for everybody, I'm going to go down chronologically, going through questions and comments. If you super chat, you cut in line, and I'll just get your question next, and then we go from there. Dr. Bob, Falasha Jews.
Well, I think they're the ones that claim to have the real Ark of the Covenant and believe that Solomon begat a son, Menelik, on the Queen of Sheba. And but really, who knows? There could have been Jewish missionaries. For instance, we know from other sources there were God-fearers, at least so-called, who were Jewish sympathizers and even practice elements of Judaism. Because in the Book of Acts, the Ethiopian eunuch, the treasurer of the royal court, is coming back from a pilgrimage to Jerusalem when Philip the evangelist encounters him. Well, that story is probably based on a story about Isaetes and Helena, the prince and queen of Adiabene, converting to Judaism. But nonetheless, the idea of an Ethiopian queen who was an adherent of Judaism, that doesn't seem all that odd. I don't know if there's enough evidence to say how there came to be Ethiopian Jews, but they are recognized as legitimate Jews by the rabbis of the state of Israel. And who knows? There were like Jews in I think the Sinai Peninsula, in Egypt, in Leontopolis, that were part of the diaspora, and they had their own fascinating version of Judaism. They had some documents from there mention their gods, Yahweh and Anat, and various other ones. Like they were polytheists and had their own temple. So who knows, when you're that close to Ethiopia, what may have happened.
It is interesting, too. We have elephantine papyri from
right.
strange offshoots of Judaism that aren't central to Jerusalem. So there's that idea. CPO Fast Forward, thank you for the super chat for answering his question. Appreciate it. Okay, let's see. Going back up to, I really appreciate that. Let's see. Concocted is a nice way of putting it, talking about Blavatsky. The 7 root race system in theosophy is just so wacky, man. It's wacky system of thought. Man, I could go for hours about this teaching. It's just wacky. Someone says, Dr. Price, how do you understand the Gospel's focus on forgiveness? Is it just good and helpful moral wisdom, or does it fit into Christianity in a particular way? Thanks.
Well, I think a friend of mine who was brought up Catholic, I don't know if she still is, but she's the world's leading authority on sleep studies and an MD in psychiatry. She's not some fundamentalist, but she says that the forgiveness teaching of the Bible is absolutely important in terms of emotional health. So it's at least sound stuff. You're the one that's going to suffer from it if you hold grudges and the like. How does it fit into Christian theology? It causes a bit of a problem with salvation by grace through faith, because there's the clear teaching in the Gospels that if you don't forgive others, you can just forget about God forgiving you. And the great parable of the 2 debtors is really a frightening one, where it's a great story. There's this guy that owes the king huge amounts of money, talents of silver and so on. And he doesn't have the money to pay up. And so the king sentences him to debtor's prison, which pretty much means life in prison until he can get bailed out by his family or somebody. He's wasting away. And he falls on his knees and begs the king, please, somehow I'll pay you. And he's so pathetic, the king says, oh, what the heck, forget it. He's rejoicing. Well, on his way home, he happens to spot this other guy that owes him a few measly bucks. And he says, hey, pay what you owe. And he's like strangling the guy. Well, one of the people that just saw what happened in the the king's court sees this and goes back and tells the king. He said, you're not going to believe what happened out here. Bring that SOB back in here. You know, that debt I forgave you, forget it. You're going to, prison. But actually what Matthew says is they delivered him over to the torturers till he should pay the whole debt back. That's not exactly Lutheranism. I mean, that's not what you think of as Pauline Christianity, that your being forgiven by God is conditional upon your being forgiving. And of course, there is a terrible conceptual problem here, because what Jesus says is, that's what my heavenly Father will do to you unless you forgive your brother from your heart. What do you mean if the alternative is eternal torment? How can I be sincere? My motive is to save my own hide. So I think that's typical of Matthew, who kind of contradicted himself. But, I mean, that's not the only place. Mark has the same thing. If you stand praying and remember that your brother has something against you, reconcile with him. And if you're not forgiving, no prayers will be answered. You're not going to be saved. So I don't know. That seems very different than the idea of I'm saved because I made a commitment to Christ.
Hallelujah.
So that's a very disturbing inconsistency, it seems to me.
Bieber, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name. Thank you for the super chat, my friend. I'm going to be looking out for your question. Oh, so he writes, he speaketh, O Lambert of God. Here's the question about Revelation 21. You might as well grab your Bible, Dr. Bob.
Yeah, sure.
You want me to turn the light on?
No.
I like it. It's kind of peaceful in here. Here's your glasses. Your God lenses, if you will. And he says, Revelation 21, beginning, and thank you for that super chat, my friend. Beginning with the verse 24. By its light will the nations walk, and the kings of the earth will bring their glory into it. 25. And its gates will never be shut by day, and there will be no night there. They will bring into it the glory and honor of the nations. 27. But nothing unclean will ever enter it, nor anyone who does what is detestable or false, but only those who are written in the Lambert's Book of Life. You like that? You like that?
Can I get a witness?
I always wondered what the writer of this passage imagined. Who are the ones outside the city's gates? If the gates are always opened and the nations and kings bring glory to the city when they are clean, who might the unclean be? May the great Dr. Bob, or Dr. Bob, somehow make a legendary comment on this new Jerusalem from the heavens? Violent Dink. It's like beaver. Okay, got it. Mm-hmm. Beaver. Dr. Bob.
Well, in 22:14, blessed are those who wash their robes, that they may have the right to the tree of life and may enter by the gates into the city. Outside are the dogs and the sorcerers and the immoral persons and the murderers and the idolaters and everyone who loves and practices lying. So it's outside. Now, does that mean they're going to continue to live in the cheap section of town or what? I don't think you can really wring more out of that than to say they're excluded from heaven, basically. Outside, it's just like in the Q passage, you're really going to be bummed out when you see the Gentiles coming from the east and the west to sit at the table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and you cast out, and hey, they're taking our place. We should be the patriarchs. Well, that means you're not part of the Messianic banquet. You're not part of salvation. Or let us in. You remember we did miracles in your name. You're not on the list. I don't recognize you. Get out of here. Well, to what? Presumably damnation. In fact, Matthew makes that explicit. So I assume that means you're not in the safety zone and this is the only place to be.
And is this imagining that the New Jerusalem comes down to heaven? Because it says, I just want to bring it back up. By its light will the nations walk, and the kings of the earth will bring their glory into it. Sounds like the nations are like just the nations, like what is prophesied in the Old Testament, that one day the nations at the end would come and recognize the truth of Israel's God, and its gates will never be shut by day, and there will be no night there. They will bring into the glory and honor of the nations, but nothing unclean will ever enter it, nor does the detestable or false, but the names written in the Lamb's book. So,
well, I would assume, I would infer from that he's saying that the kings who bring in their tribute are now safely dwelling in the New Jerusalem. Because like you say, in those passages where the kings bring their treasure in, I sort of think of the scene in the Ten Commandments, before Moses flees Egypt.
Yeah.
You see all those people in exotic costumes bringing in treasures as tribute to the emperor. And that's what they're talking about. But you look at the Micah and Isaiah passages, they're coming because now they are happy subjects of Israel.
Yeah. I'll be your servant, no problem. I saw a video actually where they were like asking modern Jews, like, are Gentiles going to be your slaves one day? Oh, no. They're going to happily want to come. And I guess that is seen in some of the texts. Sometimes they're under the rod, it appears. But anyway, normalizing atheism, ladies and gentlemen. Go subscribe to his channel. He's a really good friend of mine, and he's the one who posted the Patreon link here. You guys, there's hundreds of videos with this guy right here. Hundreds of videos on Patreon with this guy right here that have not been released. Anyway, Trying to go back up where I left off, and Super Chats cut the line. No offense, but, when you tithe in God's kitchen here, let me tell you. Let me see. Trying to catch up where we were. Is this Beelzebub, someone says? Dr. Bob, I just want to say I started to listen to the Bible Geek yesterday, and I've been listening non-stop. Enthralled ever since. Thank you so much for everything, Clayton Bigsby. Thank you, Clayton.
You're welcome. Thank you for your support and encouragement.
Absolutely. He has graduated to not only, you're more than just a Bible Geek. You have a show called The Bible Jock, too, right? I'm just
Not me.
So the secret doctrine is all rubbish, someone says. Blue Green says, some have said that the Essenes' origins are from Egypt and Akhenaten. Any views?
I doubt that. I do think it's quite likely that they have Buddhist origins. That, we don't know of any Jewish monasticism before the Hellenistic period. And and we do know that the Emperor Asoka had sent Buddhist missionaries in as early as the 3rd century in Egypt. So I think it quite likely that that was just indigenized, contextualized Buddhism, the Therapeutae and the Essenes and so on, as the late great Christian Lindner and the luckily still with us Michael Lockwood argue very effectively. But the other, it'd be a little surprising because they pretty much stamped out Akhenaten's religion when he died.
Thank you, Dr. Bob. Super chats have popped up. That means you cut the line. You skipped everybody. All right, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for the love, and it's freaking awesome. Farsight asks me a question on purpose, and I know what Farsight's up to with this question because I have the king of mythicism right in front of me. He says, Derek has said he leans toward Jesus being historical. If you don't mind me asking, what pieces of information or arguments changed your mind? I like how he said that because he didn't say what evidence, where's the empirical data? Show me his tomb, give me his corpse, or, what evidence do you have? So it's obviously going to be the way that I'm viewing certain things in my methodology that caused me to say there probably was a guy. Could have been. But also, you guys could be right. And one of the biggest things for me was crucifixion. We kind of talked about this over the past, but for me, Philo, Josephus, all these people talk about people being crucified, Jews especially, by the Romans. This was a common trait. And for me, I started looking at all the data, considering what mythicists say, and considering, was there probably a guy? Paul talks about Christ being crucified. What did he mean by that? And I'm looking at that data and I say to myself, is this really a heavenly crucifixion? So I start to read Elaine Pagel's book. And as I read her book, I started thinking, the origins of Satan, where did this come from? She points out in her book, every time you see Satan at work, there's always humans in the mix. Satan entered Judas, or get behind me, Satan, Peter. Or Satan, you're of your father Satan, if you are the father of Satan. Either way, these pictures of Satan and demons and such usually include humans. So when I heard Richard Carrier in his book argue, look, he was crucified by demons in the heavens, which I know Gnostic tendencies actually teach this, I thought to myself, the archons of this age, I wonder if these are humans. To me, it makes a lot of sense to say that there were guys that were obviously being used by evil spirits involved in crucifying Jesus. So I took a very basic approach. I'm not a staunch, hardcore historicist, but I think that there could have been a guy. And to me, it makes more sense based on the data that I'm looking at. I have not read nearly what you have. I probably never will, but it's what makes to me the most sense right now is that there probably was a guy. Then again, there's a lot of mythology here. So would you like to comment on that? And then I can get into the next super chat, Dr. Price?
Well, I find by far the most convincing case for a historical Jesus, though that's not what the author's trying to do, is S.G.F. Brandon's books, The Fall of Jerusalem and the Christian Church and Jesus and the Zealots,
where he's trying to show, he kind of takes for granted that there was a historical Jesus, and is trying to show how he must have been an armed revolutionist, a zealot in that sense, the zealot party. And that it looks like Mark is trying to hush that up and sanitize the whole thing. And Luke too. And it does look that way to me. And so it seems to me that a lot would make sense if that were the case, if Jesus were a rabble-rouser and a revolutionist who failed because he thought he could succeed miraculously, like the cargo cults and the
but his movement succeeded, right?
Well, by changing itself completely and surviving as a purely religious movement without the political intentions. That makes a lot of sense to me, but to me the problem is that it gains a lot of its apparent strength by comparing Jesus with the people that Lena Einhorn talks about, Theudas the magician, right, Judas of Galilee, etc., etc. And I kind of think that the mythical Jesus was filled out by borrowing from the stories of these characters. But I don't know.
Right.
It just seems to me that it's the pure myth thing is more likely.
And that's the thing that cautions me, is that if something is rehashed, like someone saying, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees," right? Or someone saying these woe statements, does that mean that that only happened once in history by a guy possibly named Jesus ben Ananias that's written in Josephus? Maybe. Maybe there's a guy who says that. Maybe it's only one guy. But I wonder if there's a common trope among these people rising up saying, hey, woe to you. And this is all a guesswork, right? So there's no like definitive answer. I just right now, I don't want to close that door. I've gone full mythicist and really haven't studied everything out there is to come. The end of the road isn't there for me. I'm still learning. There might come a time where I go, man, I don't know. But at this point, I don't see Jesus in the heavens being crucified as the evidence is overwhelming to say he was up there when it happened, when sure, we can argue they're euhemerized texts, the Gospels are euhemerized, they do come later. I just am like, to me, it's simple to say, well, the Gospels do have him like running around on the ground. And if Paul wasn't someone who met him, he may not know these sayings and teachings if there are any in the Gospels. So I'm highly like, I lean historicist, but I'm not a staunch anything. And so thanks for the question, Farsight, and sorry for taking so much time answering that, but I've got a long ways to go. And I love Dr. Bob, and like, I may not agree completely on the full myth idea, but I entertain these ideas. So keeping an open mind, I ask every 223 people watching right now, just be open-minded. Even if you lean or you are one thing or the other, try not to bash or ostracize the other side. So show each other love and just know this is all tenuative. Everything we're looking at is tenuative and it's probabilistic. So Matty Lenonen, I hope I'm saying that correct. Thank you for the super chat, my friend. He says, John 3:13, no one has ever gone into heaven except the one who came from heaven, the Son of Man. Is this Gnostic? The heaven to which Elijah was taken in was different from where Jesus came? That's a good question. Because you remember when Jesus said that? John 3:13 says, no one has ever gone into heaven except the one who came from heaven. Well, didn't Elijah get sucked up to heaven?
Yeah, I was just looking at this book where I make a...
Enoch did too.
Yeah, let me just see if I can find that again.
And thank you, Michael Newham, while he looks that up. I appreciate the super chat there. Super chats. And look, I could go more on and on, Farsight, into the whole historical thing of what kind of leans me that way. But nonetheless, could be wrong, and I'm totally okay with that. My salvation does not depend on it. Anyway, John 3:13. You wrote on that in your book?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
This
is the book he plugged at the beginning for those who missed it, and it is called Reinterpreting the New Testament. Don't be so sure you know what it means. Interesting. It's on Amazon. hit that like button, everybody, while we wait for Dr. Bob to answer this super chat here. Please, I appreciate everyone's love and support and all that good stuff. Helps us grow and to keep bringing Dr. Bob on. Who would want that? Crossover Maniac, I'll get to your super chat next, my friend. And Blue Green, thank you for the super chat, my friend. I really appreciate that. Like, seriously, all you guys showing love, and I really appreciate all that. Hitting that like button always helps. And Dr. Bob is trying to find... I thought you were omniscient, Dr. Bob. I'm not sure how you don't know this already. As much as you do know.
I should have it here in a second. Yeah.
John 3:13, no one has gone into heaven except the one who came from heaven, the Son of Man. Is this Gnostic?
Let's see. Yeah, let me just read about a page worth here. John 1:51 to start with. Truly, truly, I say to you, you will see heaven opened and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. And then in 5:27, he has given him authority to execute judgment because he is the Son of Man. This, like the next two texts from John, seem to reflect passages from First Enoch, as Edgar J. Goodspeed once observed. This is especially interesting since the book of Enoch is heavily dependent upon Daniel chapter 7's vision of the Son of Man, who takes the heavenly throne at the right hand of the Ancient of Days. Debate continues over the identity of Daniel's, quote, one like a son of man coming with the clouds of heaven, unquote, but it is perfectly clear that that Son of Man in the book of Enoch is the eponymous patriarch Enoch, whose righteous life earned him an ascension to heaven. There he was transfigured into superhuman form and was invested as the Son of Man. His forgotten identity with the heavenly Enoch, or Metatron, was revealed to him, and he was sent back to earth to vouchsafe his newly learned secrets to his family before returning to heaven. These revelations from the contents of First Enoch and several other Enochian scriptures John 5:27 seems to refer to the investiture of the ascended Enoch once he is revealed as the Son of Man. Once Christians decided that Jesus, not Enoch, was the pre-existent Son of Man from Daniel, the whole story was applied to him. John's Gospel takes this for granted. Similarly, John 6:62, what if you were to see the Son of Man ascending where he was before? Sounds awfully like Enoch anticipating his second departure from earth to heaven, his teaching completed. In its present Johannine text, this saying seems like Jesus' rebuke to disciples confused by their teacher's claim that he has come down from heaven. They, of course, didn't and couldn't have witnessed Jesus' descent from heaven, since it happened via an at least apparently human birth with nothing outwardly to mark it as divine, John 7:28. But if the doubters were actually to witness Jesus' ascension into the sky, would that finally convince them? One wonders if perhaps in some underlying version of an Enochian text, this saying was a challenge to Enoch's relatives who knew only that old Enoch had gone missing, soon returning to impart tall tales of a heavenly journey, and wondered if the old man was just spinning yarns. John 3:13, no one has ascended into heaven but he who descended from heaven, the Son of Man, makes more sense in an Enochian context, since Enoch was believed to have ascended, to say nothing of Elijah, many centuries before Jesus, who therefore, even as a purely literary character, can hardly have denied the famous ascension recounted in Scripture, which is what the traditional reading implies. Like Jesus he knew the Enoch story. He's not going to say nobody's ever come down from heaven, except he was into there. John 6:27, do not labor for the food which perishes, but for the food which endures to eternal life, which the Son of Man will give to you. For on him has God the Father set his seal. End of quote. In its present Johannine setting, the sentence seems to refer to Jesus' provision of sacramental bread in the presence or in the immediate future, bread that will guarantee eternal life. But with Enoch as the Son of Man, the reference would be to the extravagant millennial bounty.
So show them the cover real quick and just saying, it's kind of interesting, your question. We've been plugging this book today that Dr. Bob wrote, Reinterpreting the New Testament. Got to go down there and get it. Go to Amazon, look it up, and get that book. But yeah, Dr. Bob, that's kind of strange. Are they just rehashing an old myth here? I mean, is this all that's going on?
Well, yeah, when you look at all these stories of ascensions of Moses, Jacob, Enoch, Elijah, and so on, they're so similar and involve a divine glorification of the seer that is taken up to heaven, but some of them also have him originally coming from heaven as a heavenly being, implying that once he gets to earth, he forgets his origin, which is exactly what happens to the Gnostic Redeemer in the Hymn of the Pearl, part of the Acts of Thomas. And then he, in this ascension vision, he's caused to remember it, that he was the Son of Man and still is and will return to the earth to teach or to destroy. But there's so many commonalities there that you really know that, yeah, the story was going around and applied to several different people.
I was going to say Paul even, and there's some weird stuff.
Yes, sir.
We don't have the time, but yeah, thank you so much for that super chat and that answer. And once again, thank you to Michael Newham for the sticker, the thanks sticker, super sticker. Those are new. I've rarely seen those, so I thank you. Crossover Maniac, what does Dr. Price know about Christian universalism? Which you've got the hick that in the woods redneck guy you were talking about that talks about universalism, or he teaches universalism, that the hell is prepared for the angels only, not for humans.
Yes.
I thought that was interesting. But he says particularly Gary Amaral and the tent maker ministries. Do you have a comment on that? Thank you for the super chat.
I don't know his work. But
maybe a comment on Christian universalism.
Yeah, Hosea Ballou was influenced by Ethan Allen and rationalism, but so he was not orthodox, though he was still moving in those categories. But basically, the idea of Christian universalism is, and it was a major denomination in the 19th century. The idea was that Jesus died to save humanity, and what do you know? It worked. It's a pretty simple idea. They didn't try to do it. He did save the human race. Now, not everybody knows it, hence the need for evangelism, but they're not going to be damned if they don't know it, because God was in Christ reconciling the world to himself. And he's made us the ministers of reconciliation, telling people, be reconciled with God. In other words, he's not holding a grudge anymore. Karl Barth was sort of a Christian universalist, and he said, it's like these stories you hear, and even in the 60s, I remember hearing this, that on this or that odd Pacific island, they'd run across an old Japanese soldier, the only one surviving from his unit, who was brandishing his bayonet because nobody told him the war was over.
Oh, wow.
No radio, no nothing. So as far as he knew, it was still going on. He says, Bart said, that's the way it is with the human race. They don't know the war is over. God has declared peace.
So you're out here preaching the good news, which is the idea that it's over. Don't worry. Come on out. Don't worry. Okay, that's interesting.
Now, you might resist it, but that'll be over once you die and find yourself in heaven. You might kick yourself then and say, what did I wasted so much time. But
that's funny.
I mean, I always feel like, this nonsense that, people are not sent to hell. They choose to go to hell. You must be crazy. Nobody. That's just a cheap evasion. You're asking not to be taken seriously. So if God is imposing something on the wicked by sending them to hell, why doesn't he impose on them sanctification? Why doesn't he just strip away the veil and they see what they were missing all this time? And start praising the Lord. Hitler's up there together with the Jews he gassed, and everybody's saying, look, water under the bridge. We're in paradise now. That's a little hard to take, but I picked the most extreme example to make the point that why, if God is going to change you in an eternal way, why doesn't he do it that way?
Wow. Dr. Bob, why are you so good at doing this? I mean, I'm not even kidding you. I'm so glad I met you. I'm not kidding you. I'm dead serious. Like, when I came over here and met you the first time, I was like, this guy can talk. But no, you have a way with describing and thinking and just, can you please not die ever? Please, thank you. We would appreciate that. Seriously,
No,
I'm not even joking. We would so appreciate that. Thank you so much for this. Michael Newham gave us a sticker, and I want to read what he said because he didn't really have a question before we keep on with the super chats, and I really appreciate all the super chats, everybody. I'm going to get to you guys. Blavatsky on Jesus. For me, Jesus Christ, i.e. the man God of the Christians, copied from the avatars of every country, from the Hindu Krishna as well as the Egyptian Horus, was never a historical person. He is a deified personification of the glorified type of the great Hierophants.
Priests
Of the temples, and his story, as told in the New Testament, is an allegory assuredly containing profound esoteric truths, but still an allegory. Thank you for that sticker again and making the statement. I think that's interesting. Blue Green again, thank you. I already said it, but I'm saying it again. Thank you so much for the super chat. I really appreciate that as well. Scrolling down. Camille Hader, thank you for that super chat. Says, thank you for giving Dr. Price a platform. It ain't in the Bible, but it ought to be.
Well, can I get a witness?
Hallelujah. Nowhere Man, does Jesus cursing the fig tree, Matthew 11, come from the Old Testament or another outside source, such as Greek myths, Roman novels, etc.?
That I don't know about, though I'm sure the gods are somewhere depicted as being able to do that stuff. But I think that, did Raymond Brown say this? I think he did. He said there appear to be a few stories in the Gospels that must have originated from the infancy gospel tradition, stuff compiled in the infancy gospel of Matthew, the so-called pseudo-Matthew, as if the one we have isn't pseudo, or the infancy gospel of Thomas, or the Arabic infancy gospel and others, where you have a nativity story and then stories of Jesus, the child prodigy. And as Dr. Fee used to say, Jesus the menace, because he was the divine brat that some kid bumps into him on the playground carelessly, and Jesus says, you will go no further on your way, and the kid drops dead. He is brought to a tutor because his idiot human father thinks he's just a regular kid. And so the guy starts teaching him the alphabet, and young Jesus says, what do you think you're doing? Do you know the esoteric meaning of these letters? Well, let me inform you. And he thinks Jesus is being insolent, hits him with the ruler, and keels over dead. And stuff like this. Joseph is working in the carpenter shop, and the poor fool is so incompetent, he can't get the legs on a chair the same length. He keeps sawing more off of this. And Jesus comes into the workshop and says, Dad, stand aside. And he, like a faith healer, lengthens the legs.
We used to have a joke at the construction company I worked at. And the new guy on the scene would come. We had metal pilings that you drove in the ground with the machines. And sometimes I'd act like I was angry when they were new to the guys. They were all in on the joke. And I'd go, man, can you run up there to the Connex and ask for the pile extender? I'm asking for a metal extender. Like, it's going to stretch to metal. And then they'd go and they'd be coming back an hour later like, you idiot, man. They'd be all so mad. So mad. Anyway.
Well, that's what he did. And Brown said, for instance, that the story of Jesus making the wine from the water had to be one of those, or it looked like it was, because the disciples have been added, but they're still vestigial in the story. Originally, it was Jesus and his mother going to a local wedding reception. Why is the cosmic power, the Son of Man, needed? They're out of wine. What do you expect me to do about it? And Mary knows she can twist him around her finger and says to the steward of the feast, do whatever he tells you. It'll be something. Okay, fill up the jars, etc. And when it's dished up, ladled up, they know, boy, this is the best stuff. Oh, everybody's drunk, but just save the best stuff for now. One of my grandfather's favorite Bible passages, by the way. This is a ridiculous miracle of convenience that Jesus doesn't even want to stoop to. So he's sort of petulant. Woman, what is it between you and me, he says. Why is Jesus brusque? Because he's a brat. That's the whole point of those stories. If he were really an adult in the body of a child, think of what he says after the exorcism, after the transfiguration. He says, how long do I have to put up with you people? Whoa, that's a great passage. He's like a god on earth, and he's running out of patience with these Homo sapiens. And that's what's happened there, too. And it seems to me obvious that's exactly where the fig tree story came from. Jesus is hungry as a fig tree. Let's check it. You son of a bitch. Zap! Nobody will ever, for the crime of disappointing me, you're never bearing fruit again.
Oh my gosh.
That's another divine brat story.
That's hilarious. Seriously, that.
And you notice how Mark is embarrassed by it and says, this is a lesson of faith. If you have faith, you could do the same thing. And come to think of it, if you ask for something praying and remember that you haven't forgiven somebody, forgive them and then you'll get what you want. What? It's obvious he's trying to take the sting out of the tail of this cartoon story.
Wow. Thank you so much for that. That was good. Jacob Boyd, thank you for the super chat, big dog. Dr. Price, I'm making my way through Morton Smith's Jesus the Magician. I was blown away by several Roman depictions of Christ carrying what looks like a magic wand. Did early Christians often conflate magic with the divine?
Apparently they did, because we have a whole big fat book on Egyptian Christian magic spells. So some at least did in some places. There's an Exorcism Bowl, believe it or not, where all sorts of stuff is written on it, including the name of Jesus, God of the Hebrews. And the idea was you would cast the demon out and clump the bowl over him so he couldn't escape. And the healing techniques Jesus is shown using in Mark and John, the be opened and all that stuff. That's well-known magical healing techniques because we have loads of papyrus magic books from that area. You know how in Ephesus, Paul gets the new converts to burn their huge libraries of magic books. Well, there were plenty of them that survived.
Wow.
And so they didn't draw. In fact, magic, as some have shown, in all cultures, is just a way of saying, those are your miracles, not ours. Ours are miracles, yours are magic. And think of the story where Jesus is casting out demons, and the Pharisees and scribes on the scene say, he's just a magician. Don't take it seriously. He's in league with Beelzebub. Oh, and Jesus says, what's devilish about this? I say, in fact, aren't you attributing to Satan the work of the Spirit of God? I'd be careful if I were you. Mm-hmm. But that's what they always do. I can't deny it's supernatural, but it must be Satan.
I'm looking forward to reading that book myself. I haven't even dug into it, but Dragons in Genesis super chatted us, and I gotta show my boy some love. Go subscribe to his channel, or this is the genesis of the Dragon of Derek that will reap carnage upon you. I don't know. Anyway, he's talking about the book that you have here. If you don't mind, show them one more time. He says, "Get that book, or that book will get you." That's what Jason folks from Dragons in Genesis actually right here. You guys see it? Get the book. Tilt it a little. You got too much shining on it. Little more, little more, little more. You see the Son of Man right there with the cross. All right. Thank you, Dr. Bob. Appreciate it. Mm-hmm. Everybody get the book.
Actually, my favorite thing in here is, was there a historical Apollonius of Tyana?
That's the thing I need to read, too. I need to investigate that myself. I really do. Because that's one of the things that Bart Ehrman said. If he did exist, it's kind of a slippery slope on seeing, well, it's easy that a guy was mythologized. It's the same way Apollonius. If there was an Apollonius, then a Jesus, there's not much to compare here, especially when he was a nobody born in Nazareth. You know, there's nobody, they barely read and write. But Farsight, thank you for the super chat. How does Dr. Price think that the non-Pauline Christianity that Paul interacted with differed from other contemporary Jewish messianic movements?
I guess the big thing was, as far as we know, his rivals were Jewish nationalists because of the imposition of Torah regulations that really were boundary markers between Jews and Gentiles, designed to prevent assimilation to the pagans, which is a big danger in the cosmopolitan world. And I say danger, I mean, it's disgusting you have to even point this out, but it's not bigotry. If you want the precious Jewish culture and its legacy to survive, I'm afraid assimilation is a way of causing it to gradually dissolve. So it's not, if you're against assimilation by intermarriage, that doesn't mean you think Gentiles are no damn good or anything like that. It's just you might see it as your duty to keep your people intact. I can't criticize that.
No, there might have been rabbis in history that obviously have this view. I remember.
Oh, yeah, but
but not the overarching. Not everyone maybe thinks that way. So
and that's not the point of it. And it's not saying we're better than everybody else. No, we just have this particular covenant that we don't want to allow to just slip away.
Farsight, thank you for again super chat. As a follow-up, could allowing Paul to teach after some bribes be a way to get money from gullible Gentiles for militant resistance against Rome? So there's a theory, the Jesus hoax, and it's a scholar that I've actually researched. He's actually a PhD in philosophy, but it's not really New Testament studies that he specializes in, but he's written on this. He thinks Paul is trying to recruit people to kind of jab at Rome and potentially create a big enough following to fight against Rome.
That just seems to me wild speculation. I mean, anything's possible, but he might have been a UFO pilot for all we know. I mean,
But I do want to go back to Farside's question, because I don't think I've accurately presented his point. He's not saying that. He says, as a follow-up, could allowing Paul to teach after some bribes be a way to get money from gullible Gentiles for militant resistance against Rome? So not that the Gentiles themselves are a resistance against Rome, but could Paul be?
there's just no reason to think that. I mean, unless I've been missing something for 50 years reading this, I just don't see where you get that. What would suggest it?
You know, according to the scholar who wrote the Jesus hoax, he tries to take the angle that the Jews have been controlled by Rome this whole time, and I think he's trying to throw them off their backs so they can gain control of the land again or something.
I just don't see that. I don't see any reason to think that.
I always do this with this name, then. I'll go to the next one. Thank you, Farside, for the question, man. I'm sorry if that didn't quite suffice. But I always say, this is exactly how I always pronounce his name. Arjen van de Weerd.
Van der Weerd.
Yes. I always just literalize that. He says, thanks to Dr. Price and his apostle Derek. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, my friend. I am an apostle. Mm. And I'm proud to say it because I like to be critical and think and expand my information. And this is a living encyclopedia. Who wouldn't want to learn from Dr. Price? Let's see. Skipping down. I don't know if I missed anyone's super chat, so I'm trying not to do that. When people pitch money toward the Church of MythVision, man, I never leave them hanging. All right. So I don't even know where to begin, you guys. I'm going back up to the tippy somewhat. Hopefully I can find where we left off. Oh, goodness gracious. I'm going to just start somewhere. If there's a question that I see until a super chat comes in, I'm going to start somewhere where I see questions because we've gotten way, way further, if you will. Sounds like we've had a few Christians pop in and they said something like, Jesus is real. These are all caps, which means they're yelling. Exclamation point, you know. Hell and heaven are real. And then repent. Just so you know. Charlie Smith. There you go, man. I said it out loud, bro. I planted the seed, and let's hope that the seed of faith grows not on stony ground. I'm being silly. And then he yelling at someone says, no, it's not. So I don't know what's going on. And he says, Jesus is real. Someone's having a mental breakdown right now in the comments section. Okay, couldn't it be, as Christ said, that there is a greater and lesser heaven at MythVision? Converse Contender asks. I don't know. What do you think, Dr. Bob?
A greater and lesser heaven.
Yeah.
Well, in the Gospel of Thomas, he says, this heaven will pass away and the one above it will pass away. But that's a common ancient Jewish and other belief that there are tiered heavens. Paul speaks of having gone to the third heaven, and many ancient Jewish texts speak of either 3 heavens or 7 heavens. But I'm not sure
what the question is. Kind of, yeah. Charlie Smith again. Because you reject Jesus, all caps. Torture or sacrifice on the cross to save you from hell. I mean, wow. Okay, scrolling down. Let's see. Christos or Crestos? How of can I be and still get in?
How what can you be?
I don't think there's a question to you. I'm just kind of looking for questions here that people put throughout. Because when we run out of super chats, I try to run to questions after that aren't super chats. Mm-hmm. Someone just super chatted, so I'm scrolling down. I literally try to hunt them because they're hidden. They're like secret messages. Trude Hell says, Bible fun. I want more. What is the funniest thing to read, both canon and non-canon? Thank you for the super chat, Trude.
Well, as I've said before, to me the funniest thing in the Bible, and intentionally so, I'm quite sure, is the story of Peter on death row when his fans are at John Mark's mother's house praying for his rescue, and is in the jail cell an angel appears and kicks him in the ribs to wake him up, and he thinks he's having a dream. And so he goes to the angel, just like Scrooge with the Ghost of Christmas Past, and they walk out into the street. And he still thinks he's dreaming, but then the angel disappears and the gate opens by itself, and he says, "This is real. I'm free." And so he makes a beeline for Mark's mother's house. He knows they're there praying for him. He knocks on the door, and Rhoda, the maid, opens the door a crack and sees him, and she's shocked so much so she doesn't even open the door, and she runs into where the prayer circle is. "Oh Lord, please let your servant live."
Peter.
And she says, "You're not going to believe this, but it's Peter at the door." And they say, "You're crazy, it must be his angel." And then he comes in. That is such a great piece of satire. All these devout prayer warriors are they're petitioning God, and it doesn't even enter their minds that God might do what they ask.
Yeah.
That is so rich. That's just made for sermons.
Yeah, heck yeah.
Oh, and the non-canonical one.
Funny, yeah. Funniest thing to read, non-canonical.
In the Acts of John, John and his disciples they check into this literally a flea bag inn, and there's all in the one room they have to share. There's a crummy mat on the floor, and it's overrun with bed bugs. And so John says, "Bed bugs, leave the servants of God in peace." And so they all, and it says that his disciples laugh at this as if he's just joking, but the bugs leave. And then in the morning, they're all lined up at the threshold, and when John and the others leave, say, "Okay, you can go back," and they do.
No!
And that is not only funny, but I think the only story, I don't know if there are stories in the Bible where anybody laughs in a non-scornful way. Wow. But it has these people laughing at what they think is a joke.
That's funny. Oh my gosh. Good question.
Yeah.
Bring the fun into this. Hitting these super chats, and I do see you guys tagging at MythVision, so if we stop hitting super chats, I'll try and come back up to you guys. Jacob Boyd, what do you make, and thank you for the super chat, what do you make of Ezekiel's bad commandments passage, Ezekiel 20? I'm from North Carolina, so a Billy Graham voice will work if you read from the passage. Ooh.
Yeah, I know what this is. Ezekiel 20?
Yeah, Ezekiel 20, the bad commandments passage.
Yeah.
This is awesome. Thank you for the likes, everybody who liked this video. I really appreciate it. And, just showing love, sharing this kind of stuff out there. All right.
Yeah. Let's see. Ooh, well, let me go a little further up. I am the Lord your God. Walk in my statutes and keep my ordinances and observe them, and sanctify my Sabbaths. And they shall be a sign between me and you, that you may know that I am the Lord your God. But the children rebelled against me. They did not walk in my statutes, nor were they careful to observe my ordinances, by which if a man observes them, he will live. They profaned my Sabbaths. So I resolved to pour out my wrath on them, to accomplish my anger against them in the wilderness. But I withdrew my hand and acted for the sake of my name, that it should not be profaned in the sight of the nations in whose sight I had brought them out. I swore to them in the wilderness that I would scatter them among the nations and disperse them among the lands, because they had not observed my ordinances, but had rejected my statutes and had profaned my Sabbaths, and their eyes were on the idols of their fathers. And I also gave them statutes that were not good, and ordinances by which they could not live. And I pronounced them unclean because of their gifts, in that they caused all their firstborn to pass through the fire, so that I might make them desolate, in order that they might know that I am the Lord. What?
Dude, that's crazy. I give them bad statutes. Like, if God isn't Satan in a way right there, I don't know what else
Well,
is.
he's saying I gave them wholesome ones that would be a guide to a good life, but that wasn't good enough for them. It's sort of like a way of saying in First Thessalonians, they wouldn't believe the truth, so okay, how about this lie? You like that better? But still, that is saying he commanded infant sacrifice as a kind of a punishment. And it's amazing, and I think that's in there because of something else that is in here in the so-called Book of the Covenant in Exodus. Let's see.
He's looking at the Bible. Hit that like button, ladies and gentlemen, please.
Let's see. This in a second, I think.
You guys rock. Thank you for hitting that like button, everybody who's hitting it. Thank you. Dr. Bob's about to blast off blasphemy here. I'm excited to hear this, though.
You shall not delay the offering from your harvest and your vintage. The firstborn of your sons you shall give to me. You shall do the same with your oxen and with your sheep. It shall be with its mother 7 days, and on the 8th day you shall give it to me. You know what that means. Infant sacrifice of the firstborn. So it was in the Torah. They couldn't very well say, well, it was a false prophecy. So they came as close as they could to say that God did command it, but just as a terrible wake-up call.
Oh, what an excuse, huh? What an excuse, because you don't give your oxen and your sheep and your firstborn, oh, well, we're going to interpret that to mean something different than giving your oxen and your firstborn and whatnot.
Well, here's what they eventually did in the priestly account. It modifies this. You shall devote to the Lord the first offspring of every womb, and the first offspring of every beast that you own. The males belong to the Lord. But every first offspring of a donkey you shall redeem with a lamb. But if you do not redeem it, then you shall break its neck. And every firstborn of man among your sons you shall redeem. So they give him a break finally and say, oh, we're amending this. Technically, yes, you owe it to God. It's a kind of, the logic was, you give the firstborn of the wheat or the animals to God and as a thank offering, and you can count on him multiplying more of whatever the goods were.
Wow.
But no, here they say, no, you can buy him back, redeem him, and give an animal instead, so it'll count. Now, what is this? So they're thinking of, it's the kind of thing that this hadn't been changed yet when Ezekiel was written. And then you've got one of the meanings of the thing with Abraham nearly sacrificing Isaac had to be this, right? That God tells Abe to go and sacrifice your son. Okay, and he takes him, but at the last minute, he said, oh, just kidding. Look, there's a ram over there.
Jeez.
Kill him instead. And of course, that's a ceremonial story to say from now on we're not killing sons.
And I mean, good. I'm glad they stopped. Nowhere Man, thank you for the super chat. What is the origin of Jesus resurrecting Lazarus in John 11? Is that from the Old Testament or some other source? And we have some other super chats here. I'm looking, we're going to get those next. I really appreciate it. So what is the origin of Jesus resurrecting Lazarus, Dr. Paul?
I think Randall Helms is right, and that's a retelling of the resurrection of Osiris. In fact, he says that the name Lazarus, which was like a colloquial version of Eleazar, is it is just a kind of punning redoing of El God Osiris, Eleazar, and that the Mary and Martha are the sisters Isis and Nephthys, who seek the body of their slain brother and beseech Jesus to do something about it, implying raise him from the dead, and he does. So I think it's like our article about the Jesus and Osiris. I think he's got to be right.
So if you guys don't know, on the Journal of Higher Criticism, you can look for it. There's an article on Osiris, Joseph, Jesus, and Josephus. I think we mentioned Joseph. Yeah. Where you and me were co-authoring on that, but really you wrote the whole thing.
Right, based on your ideas.
Yeah, and so that's in the Journal of Higher Criticism. If anyone's interested, to go check that out on Amazon. Asmode US UK 1, thank you for the super chat, my friend. Does Dr. Price have a view on why there is no physical description of Jesus or other biblical figures? Was it because it wasn't part of the Prism tradition?
Prism?
Prism. Maybe there's a mess up in the word there. I don't know, but.
Well, Gunkel pointed out in his book, The Legends of Genesis, that the Bible writers don't bother telling you what people look like unless some feature was important in the story. Like, do we hear what kind of haircut most people had? No, but we hear about Samson's because it's a vestige of him being the sun god. Do we hear about bald guys? Not usually, but we do with Elisha because he is the moon. Whereas his predecessor, Elijah, was the sun, hence he's called a hairy man. So these are vestiges surviving from an earlier stage. And there's not supposed to be anything important about Jesus' appearance, apparently, except for the transfiguration in Matthew, where he glows like the sun, or really like Moses coming out of the tent of meeting. But Mark wasn't trying to make that point, so they don't bother telling you. He was nondescript. Maybe they were thinking of the passage in Isaiah 53, he hath no comeliness that we should desire him. If they thought that predicted Jesus, they must have thought, well, he has no unusual appearance.
Thank you. I hope that answered your question. I'll try and keep an eye out in case that didn't, Asmode, so let me know. Farsight, again, super chat, thank you. He says, what I meant to ask was more along the lines of, could non-Pauline Christians have been part of the militant Messianic movement, or do we know that they were an early pacifistic Messianic movement?
They could have been. In fact, Hugh Schoenfield thought that they were militant zealot types, that James and the Jerusalem Christians were. And I believe Brandon thought so too, that he laid great store by the theory that the old story of Jerusalem Christians being alerted in advance of the coming Roman siege hightailed it out of the city and went to Pella and across the Jordan. And he said, no, I don't think that's true. That was just a legend, a foundation legend for a Jewish Christian congregation in Pella that was just trying to appropriate the clout of the now vanished Jerusalem church. And why vanished? Because they must have been killed in the siege of the city. That's good thinking. It's impossible to be sure, but it wouldn't be surprising. And you know, the thing about in Acts, they complained to Gallio or some Roman official that these men who have turned the world upside down have now come here and advocate customs which it is not lawful for us as Roman citizens to embrace. That may be what Schoenfield was thinking of, that they were. Or later still, the Jewish elders in Rome say to Paul, oh no, that's not them. It's before Agrippa or one of those guys. The lawyer accuses Paul of being a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes, which sounds like they must be a subversive bunch. I suppose from that, Schoenfield said, probably they were, and that was a big difference between them and Pauline Christianity. So it could well be.
Thank you so much for answering that. I appreciate the question and the super chat. And hit that like button, everybody. I appreciate it. Crossover Maniac, thank you for the super chat. According to Paul, Jesus was the first fruit of the resurrection. But this is after the resurrection of the widow's son by Elijah, Jairus' daughter, and Lazarus. Isn't this evidence for an earlier resurrection of Jesus? You get the idea that all these other people have been risen from the dead, obviously prior to Jesus. But he's supposed to be the first fruits of the resurrection. Well,
I don't see much of a problem there, because he calls Jesus that in 1 Corinthians 15, where he also characterizes the resurrection body as spiritual, not fleshly, because if it were fleshly, you just grow old and die again. What's the point? So you have to have a spiritual body. Well, there's no hint that Lazarus, Jairus' daughter, the son of the widow of Nain, had any superhuman or ghostly characteristics. They were basically resuscitated. And in fact, as J. Duncan M. Derritt pointed out in a book called Anastasis, the Resurrection as Historical Event, he showed from ancient medical texts, of which we have plenty, that premature burials were so common that they would put in instructions for how to test to see if the person was really dead, because it was too frequent that they were buried alive. Sometimes, like the zombies in Haiti, who really do exist, of course, they're not supernatural, they're just drugging people, stashing them in a cemetery and looking at their watch to see how long it's going to take, because they know how long the duration of the drugs affect the Bokors or the witch doctors. And when it's time to wake up, they send some goons down there to drug them again, enough to make them passive slaves working in the cornfield. And meanwhile, their relatives who contracted with the sorcerers to do this, so they could get the guy out of the way and inherit his money, they're happy enough to be without him.
Oh, wow.
And we know this happened because one of these guys snapped out of it prematurely. What the heck am I doing here? And went back into town, and they pieced it together, and even had a nail scar in his upper lip from when they nailed him into the coffin. So, I mean, people had done that sort of thing long before. We even have a story in, I think, the Metamorphosis by Lucian, where this doctor discovers a scheme that the relatives were doing exactly that, and they were in big trouble when this guy managed to bring the man out of it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bob.
Well, I'm sorry, my point was that that it's very likely that that's what the Jairus' daughter and even the Lazarus thing, how they were intended. That after all, Jesus is all the time saying, she's not dead. Or Lazarus, he's not dead. And then they say, well, he's just asleep. And I say, well, in that case, we'll wake up when the fever breaks. No, he's dead. All right, idiot. We're going to go wake him up. But you got to wonder if he's not just playing along. And notice he says, push the stone out of the way. He said, Lord, by this time he stinketh.
Yeah.
How do they know until they open the door? They just assume he's dead and has been dead for 4 days, so he must reek. But it doesn't say that he did.
Right.
It was supposition. And that's the way these stories were told. I'm not like an 18th century rationalist. I don't think these things happened, and this is the real story. No, it's just that there were loads of stories like that, so many that it looks like that's what we're reading here.
I appreciate that, seriously. Ed Dodge. Super chat. Ask Dr. Bob about the swoon theory and how Jesus may have been drugged on the cross to fake his death. Bible fun. Isn't it strange? I have to say, the last question was about Jesus being the first fruit of the resurrection and like these other people who rose from the dead. And then the immediate question is from Ed Dodge saying, what's up with this swoons theory? He's drugged and he survives. Can you talk about
I was talking to Ed about this yesterday. Yeah, it's very fascinating, and I hold a kind of a weird hybrid position on this. As you know, I don't even necessarily think Jesus existed, but I do think that there was an earlier version of the Jesus story that still winks out at you from the various Gospels that fit the notion that earlier Jesus was believed to have been crucified but survived it. Now, what are some of the reasons that made me think that? Well, for one thing, there is the genre of the Hellenistic romance novels. And there is the love element, but romance also in the sense of high adventure. There are at least 3 of these we know of, and the genre flourished between for some 7 centuries, flourishing the most in the 2nd century CE or AD. And in these stories, a guy's fiance or wife or girlfriend it passes into a coma, and they think she's dead, and so she's buried in she's, let's say, interred in a mausoleum, because they're all aristocrats in these stories. So she's not buried in the ground, but she's placed like Jesus, sort of on a platform.
Yeah, rich man's tomb.
Yeah, and so the tomb robbers, a thriving trade back then, they notice, hey, look, that opulent tomb is now sealed. That's just what we've been waiting for. There must be all kinds of great stuff in there, like the pharaohs, being buried with all the goodies, the CD players and
CD players.
And so they wait till the night comes and they pry the door open. But wouldn't you know it, just at this time, the woman is coming out of the swoon. And they say, oh, my God, she's not dead, and now we have a witness. What are we going to do? Well, we can't kill her. We'll be in even more trouble if they find us. Let's take her along and sell her as a slave somewhere, and they'll never know. So they do this. And the next morning, the husband, fiance, boyfriend, whatever, shows up to mourn, and the door's open. And he goes in there, and the tomb is empty, and the burial shroud is left by itself. And his first reaction is, the gods envied me because of her beauty, and they've taken her up to heaven. But then others follow him in, and they say, no, it's been jimmied or whatever. The body has been stolen. I don't know if she's alive or what. And so this guy commences a trip all over the Mediterranean in her wake, trying to chase her. And have you seen this woman? And because the kidnappers have brought her, I forget why, all over the place. In the course of this, the guy is arrested by some king, governor, whatever, and for some reason condemned to be crucified. And there are 3 in which this happens that we know of. And he either is acquitted at the last moment, or is actually crucified but tied to the cross and survives it. And then he resumes the search, finally finds her, and the lovers are reunited, and neither one can believe you're still alive. I gave you up for dead, but I had. Does this sound familiar in any way? And this is a part of the broader tradition of the innocent, righteous man who was persecuted but wins in the end, and because he's faithful, like Daniel and Joseph and others. And the idea of him being crucified, there's no redemptive meaning to it. It's just the darkness before the dawn. How's he going to get out of this? Well, he does, and so forth. Well, it seems to me you got to ask if the Jesus story could at some point have been understood this way. And there are interesting hints. For instance, in Gethsemane, Jesus prays his guts out that God will save him the ordeal of crucifixion. As the Muslim apologists say, what, God's not going to answer that prayer? In fact, in Hebrews, it says he was heard because of his loud cries and moaning. Then, so he gets to the cross, he's crucified, and his enemies are mocking him sadistically. There you're the Christ. Why don't you come on down from the cross and then we'll believe? You stupid idiot. That's exactly what's going to happen. And they take him, they give him the stuff in the sponge, whatever it is. Yeah. And they take the body down. Joseph asks Pilate if he can take charge. And he says, what, he's dead already? After a lousy 6 hours, it should take days. No, he's dead, all right. They can't tell the difference. And so Joseph, a rich man, inters him in his tomb. And why do we hear that he is a wealthy man? I think somebody got on the one hand, got the idea from Isaiah 53.
By the way, while you're looking for that, I just think it's interesting to note they don't break the thieves on the cross's knees till John, right? To signify
that's right.
He's really, really dead, everybody.
That's right. Sure the stabbings, it's not in the synoptics.
Right.
And it's there because of trying to rebut the idea of a false death.
Someone's probably already accusing him of this, so yeah.
Let's see.
He's looking.
He was just, Isaiah 53:9. His grave was assigned to be with wicked men. They buried him as a criminal. Yet with a rich man in his death. Well, Joseph of Arimathea is rich. Now, in terms of narrative motivation, what difference does it make? Well, it gives the motivation for robbers to open the tomb. And they find he's rousing and so on. Somebody takes him in and nurses him back to health, and he appears alive again. And especially in Luke, they think he's dead. They have no idea what happens, and they're mourning him. And suddenly here's Jesus, and they say it's a ghost, because last they knew this guy was dead. And he says, no, touch me and see. It is I myself. No spirit has flesh and bones as you see that I have. In other words, I didn't die. The polarity is if he were a ghost, he'd be back from the dead. But the fact that he's not a ghost means he didn't die. And same thing with Apollonius of Tyana. There's a nearly identical scene. His disciples, after his trial, they figure he must have been executed, but he sent us back here. And suddenly he shows up, and is it really you? Or is it some ghost? And he says, no, to show you I'm not a refugee from Persephone's realm. Reach out and touch me and see I'm solid flesh. Same thing, and Apollonius was pointedly not killed. He escaped during the trial. And so Luke 24 sounds so much like this. You gotta wonder. And then in John, right, how about certain Greeks come to see Jesus? Sir, we would see Jesus. And he says, well, he's going away and all that. And his critics say, where's he going? Is he going to go to the diaspora and preach to the Jews there, or preach to the Greeks? And he doesn't say. Well, I think, and then you have to have the spear thrust and the blood and water.
Right.
I think all of that is an attempt by John to say, oh, no, he really died all right.
Died.
He didn't actually leave and take it on the lam, as some say.
Yeah. He's really trying to cover up the problem. And there's some Christian or people that are already saying, good try, nice try. They're probably pointing this stuff out. Thank you so much for that. Really,
now, I don't know that that's what happened.
No, it's a great theory. That's why I love you. Like you just got done saying that Osiris mimics Lazarus, and the very next explanation you were saying he probably didn't die. So, like, people need to realize that when you're throwing out these ideas, you're like going through multiple books in your mind and different authors with theories, and you're throwing them out. Well, so and so thinks this and this that. So no, we get it. We totally.
Well, I just want to clarify though. I'm thinking that there was a pre-canonical version of this in the Gospels where he didn't die, but under the influence perhaps of the mystery religions where you had a dying and rising God, that was superimposed on it clumsily in John's case. So that I don't think that's what happened. I'm not saying that's what the Gospels say happened, but I think at one point they did.
Interesting. Thank you, Dr. Bob. Michael Poole, thank you for the super chat. Got a couple super chats. I've downloaded The Falsified Paul by Herman Dettering.
Wow.
Are there any other publications or books which expound on non-Pauline of the epistles?
You mean, I'm not quite sure I get the end there.
So I've downloaded Falsified Paul by Herman Dettering. Are there any other publications, books, which expound on non-Pauline of the epistles?
Probably the non-Pauline authorship of the epistles, I imagine. Yeah, there are some that were influenced by the Dutch radical school. The things I would love to read are Bruno Bauer's books on this, because he was really the first one to say that Paul wrote none of the letters. And shortly after him, Van Manen did, but they both wrote in German and Dutch, and it's no surprise no one has ever translated them. Though Ed Solomon and I published a compilation of English writings of Van Manen, which do go a lot into this. You can still get it, I guess, from Intellectual Press. It's called A Wave of Hypercriticism. So that's a goodie. But there are books by one guy named, I think it's L. Gordon Rylands, Rylands. And then there's another one by Thomas Whitaker. I forget the titles, but if you find anything by those guys, I get them mixed up. And they're long out of print, but they're probably available on ABE somewhere. And there's another one by, it's a name as long as a sentence. Somebody Vandenberg Eisinga, and the last word is, I think, Eysinger. There can't be too many people named that, so if you looked him up, you'd probably find it. I've had divine providence aiding me on this. I found Van Eisinga. His book was Radical Views on the New Testament. I ran across this in the basement of the Barnes & Noble sale annex in Manhattan.
Wow.
And I've been real lucky coming up with these.
Yeah, you remember all these names too. That's what's really, Yeah.
And interestingly, like Whitaker and Rylands don't have quite the same account of who wrote them and why. So there's a range even within the Dutch radical school, and it's well worth reading, everybody.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bob. And thanks for that super chat, my friend. Scott Turf, thank you for the super chat. Is it possible Mark gave the locust and wild honey diet to John the Baptist to distance him from Oannes, food not available in the ocean?
I doubt it. It's possible, and I do think it's not unlikely that John was originally Oannes, this merman kind of who emerged from the waters to teach wisdom to mankind, and that's almost the same name as the Greek for John. So, I mean, I take that seriously. That was a theory of Robert Eisler's, but you can't know. And assuming there was a John the Baptist, the diet of the locusts and the wild honey, that's what the Qumran community ate. And either actual locusts or carob pods, which were called locusts. That I find that entirely natural, that if he was an ascetic, like in the same way he wore a camel hair tunic, people say, well, he was trying to say, hey, look, I'm Elijah returned. Not necessarily. We're told in Deutero-Zechariah, I think, that was the common garb of would-be prophets. So that the same thing here. I mean, what we think is so distinctive may not have been.
Huh. Thank you, Dr. Bob. Thanks for that super chat, my friend. Bob Wilderfish, I think I'm saying Bob Wilderfish. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Thank you for the enormous super chat. Really looking out. When it turns red, that's always like a really good sign, you know? Dr. Bob, what's your favorite story or pericope in the whole Bible? Your favorite? It's a good question.
Well, it's self-contained like a pericope, but they're usually thought of as shorter items. But I was thinking the other day that my favorite story is probably the Resurrection of Lazarus.
That's your favorite?
Yeah, it's got drama. It's awe-inspiring. It's really so great. And of course, there's lots of great stuff to choose from, so it's a hard decision. But I think that's probably the one that I like the best.
What about in the Old Testament? There's so many little clever, cool stories in the Old Testament.
Yeah. I like The Witch of Endor. My favorite book of the Old Testament by far is Job, which I consider the great masterpiece of the Bible. Mm-hmm. Which again is saying something, since there's loads of masterpieces in there.
You're digging deep.
Yeah.
You're really digging, Bob. Once he says it, that's it for life. Is there a story at all in particular that sticks out? I like Jonah. I'm sorry.
That's a great one.
Because the dude wants to die. He's so pissed off because he knows God's going to show mercy, and he's so sick of this, and he's like, no! And the guy, he's dead asleep, the boat's rocking, everyone's done for. And what are you doing asleep, man? What and they remember him telling him, well, I'm running from God, which is so funny that it's so fictional in so many ways. And then they're like, all right, he's like, just throw me in the ocean. And Then they pray and they're like, listen, we don't want his blood on our hands, God. Show mercy, And the next thing you know, kaplunk, they throw him anyway. And this fish swallows him. I just think that's such a hilarious story.
It's great, yeah. And I think it's just as funny when he does preach and they all repent and his nose is out of joint and God says, why are you so bummed out? Well, some caterpillar chopped down the gourd vine that was giving me shade. He says, you're upset about this crummy gourd when all these hundreds of people who don't know their ass from their elbow are about to be destroyed and you don't care? Woo!
Yeah, but I cut you off. Did something come to mind before Jonah, though? Anything. I don't care what it is. And then we'll move on to the next question. You're thinking so hard about this. It's so hard to find out.
Maybe some Elijah story.
I was thinking the burning from heaven, and then the bell issue. But then again, you've also got the what is her, the queen?
Jezebel.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wrote my own version of that story. The savage sword of Jehu.
Oh.
Where we find out that Baal is this slithering Lovecraftian deity from another dimension, and that Jezebel is indulging in horrific sex magic with demons in order to open the portal.
Oh my gosh.
It's a pretty good one.
I need to meet a Jezebel. I'm just kidding. Octanes, thank you for the super chat. Probably asked before, and yes, it has been, my friend, but that's okay. I'm going to ask it again on camera. We did record this. It's not released to the Patreon yet. Or no, it did. Maybe it is. I did release this on Patreon. So your question is, what does Dr. Bob think about the authenticity of the secret gospel of Mark?
I doubt it. There's too much evidence that it's a forgery. There's too much vocabulary, the favorite vocabulary of the ostensible author, Clement of Alexandria. For too much of it, I say, in a little fragment, it implies somebody was larding it with Clementine idiom in order to convince you that he wrote it, like you ordinarily wouldn't have that much. There's other problems. But it reads like somebody has just taken snippets out of the Gospels and pasted them together. There's no real original stuff, hardly any.
Right.
So I think it probably is not authentic. It's a modern hoax, I think. But I hope it isn't, because boy, would that fit certain theories. So I'm kind of on the fence on that one.
Yeah. Oh, man. Stephen Music, super chat. Thank you so much for the super chat, my friend. Am I wrong to think Joseph of Arimathea was Nabatean? Jesus' connection to the spice trade and India.
Is it because in John he and Nicodemus bring 100 pounds of spice?
I would maybe. What do you think?
Well, we don't really know where Arimathea is supposed to be, or if it's even actually a place name. Richard Carrier says that you could break it down into Greek and say it means best disciple town. Not that any place would actually be called that, but it's kind of like saying the disciple Jesus loved. Well, he comes from where they know how to mint good disciples. Kind of a weird metaphor, but that's intriguing. Could well be. There is I think there is a Hebrew place name that does sound kind of like that. So I don't know if there was, but the notion that the spice, Eisenman thinks that this comes from a rabbinic tale that has to do with a huge amount of perfume and ointment that was rewritten. I can't remember the details of it now. But that could be, because I think he really has an instinct to spot these things. And we do hear of some rabbi who was, can't think of who was buried with some huge amount of unguents and so on. I guess to be extra sure the body would be preserved for a long time. So it's not, I mean, it's extravagant, but that may be the point of it. So I don't know. But the spice association in and of itself wouldn't really suggest that to me.
Thank you for answering, and thank you for that super chat, Dr. Bob. Thank you. Crepitus S, thank you for the super chat. At Derek, I work in IT and had a now retired coworker who used to tell me he didn't like that they needed to unplug all their lab computers' Ethernet cables and shake out the bad data. And they put like the little angel, little halo. I'm not sure I quite understand what you're saying, brother. So if you could, follow up with some comments, I'll try and keep an eye out. But not sure exactly what you're trying to get at there. So please, I'll be on the lookout for your comment. And Nowhere Man, what is Dr. Bob's opinion of the death of God theology from the 60s, i.e. Hamilton and Altizer? And if it is still relevant today? Thank you for the super chat.
Yeah, I really think it is. I love the death of God theology. I had heard of it while it was a big fad and thought it was nuts, because I was a fundamentalist then. But in the 80s, I guess, I began reading those books. Well, in school, I had to read Altizer's The Gospel of Christian Atheism and was much impressed with it. But then later on, I read his book, The Descent into Hell, and was even more impressed with it. I read Langdon Gilkey's book, Reaping the Whirlwind, where he is a liberal theologian, but he really hated the death of God theology. He wrote this big, fat book trying to refute it, and yet it made me more attracted to it. And so I then read Hamilton's New Future of Christianity, Paul Van Buren's The Secular Meaning of the Gospel. They all had somewhat different approaches, but they were lumped together. Gabriel Vahanian wrote one that was actually called The Death of God. But I never had any contact with Hamilton, but I heard Paul Van Buren speak, and he had kind of moved on to something else, which disappointed me. But I had dinner with Vahanian once in New York, and he was hilarious. My advisor and mentor at Montclair State College, Michael Kogan, and this guy was a riot. He once he was given a theological paper, and he referred to God as he, and all some woman in the crowd had to say was, "Why don't you call God she some of the time?" And this blindsided Vahania, "What?" And he said, "Look, he, she, it, shit, what difference does it make?" He was hilarious. But he said that he was lamenting the death of God in the West, kind of like a Nietzschean lament, only he didn't think it was a liberating thing. And I think we're seeing the results, the kind of collapse he's talking about, without the sacred canopy that religion provided for so long. He said that what Altizer considered the cure, he considered the disease. Well, I got to know Altizer a bit in the last years of his life. He wrote stuff for me. This man was absolutely amazing. He was a mystic experientially. He knew all sorts of poetry and literature. He figured Hegel, William Blake, Nietzsche, etc., into his theology, into biblical eschatology. And the result, he wrote many books that I admit I cannot crack. I just don't understand them.
Oh, wow.
But there were a couple, and his shorter writings that I just still find spine tingling to think about. And he was unique. I mean, I think he was perhaps the greatest theologian of the 20th century. And just an irreplaceable,
wow,
amazing figure. He was a student of Mircea Eliade, who he said inflicted a curse on him. He said he had experienced Satan invading his body. And this is like a rational, secular, competent guy. But he had these wild experiences that he was open to. Just amazing. It's like he knew religion, esoteric and otherwise, from the inside out. A rare, rare gift. I wonder if there's ever going to be anybody else like him. But I found he was really a Nietzschean, and I found that very powerful. Eventually, I did a book of my deconstructionist sermons, because actually he was way ahead of his time, and deconstructive criticism and philosophy fit perfectly with his theology decades later. And so I wrote this book called Preaching Deconstruction, a bunch of my deconstructivist sermons I'd given in church. And the subtitle was something about the theology of the thought of Thomas Altizer and Jacques Derrida, the father of deconstruction. And Altizer said he had never read anybody able to apply this kind of thing to existential issues in a pastoral way. And so he wrote an introduction for it.
Oh, wow.
And I am so thrilled that I wish I could have met Tillich. I was too late for that. But Altizer, just astounding. So I love the death of God theology.
Thank you, Dr. Bob. Abdullah, thank you for the happy birthday and the super chat, my friend. I really appreciate that love. Yeah, I'm 33 years old now. We don't know when I'm getting crucified. Crepitus said his friend, or who it was, would tell people to unplug their hardwired machines and leave them. Not necessarily at all, just to waste their time and give him time not to have to talk to them. Sorry. Then he wrote, your story about the metal stretcher thing reminded me. That is so true. We used to send off the new guy. I mean, we do it with multiple things. If it wasn't the metal stretcher, it was the sky hook. Go grab the sky hook. And I mean, they're looking and they're asking for this.
Like a snipe hunt.
Oh my gosh. It's always something. Seriously.
Oh boy, that's a riot.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope I got it.
Well, you could do a thing like that. Hey, why don't you go find the historical Jesus for us? That's going to keep him busy for a while.
I don't think he'll ever come back, though.
Yeah, that's right.
The only problem is, actually finding that is going to be impossible. I'm trying to scroll up and see any ats since we don't have any more super chats, and looking for at MythVision questions, because you guys added me a while ago. Are there Prophet Muhammad following Christians? Good question, Dr. Bob. Jojo Freelancer, thank you for the question.
I doubt it. The closest thing that comes to mind is Karen Armstrong, who was sort of a Muhammad butt kisser. But she just has this naive, optimistic view. She wants to iron out all the religions, make them all true, and she doesn't care about the history of the matter. At the Jesus seminar once, she was talking about the Buddha. And question time came around, and I said, our whole enterprise here is dedicated to try to figure out what of this stuff is authentic, and did Jesus really say and do it? But I get the impression you just don't care about that in connection with a Buddha. If it says Buddha said, that's good enough for you. And she said, well, yeah, that's right. And I think she also whitewashes Islam. and she just wants everything to be hunky-dory. And so that's as close as I can think of, but I don't know of any Christians that consider Muhammad a genuine prophet, though there probably are some ecumenists. And I would not, I mean, if I believed in supernaturalism, that would attract me, because I've read the Quran 4 times in different translations. And I am fascinated by the history of Islamic theology and all of that stuff. It's a little tough to remember that when you hear about Muslim atrocities, but you have to try to distinguish the two. But there probably are some that try to fold Muhammad into the thing.
So, Melissa, thank you for carrying the mythicist torch, by the way, just so you know. And I see some other questions. We do got a super chat here. Thank you for the super chat. Greetings from Warsaw. What is your opinion about Marcion hypothesis claims that the first produced or compiled gospel was that of Marcion?
There are too many issues involved with that I either cannot remember or have not studied up on yet. I've got about 3 big books on Marcion on the shelf I haven't read yet. But it would not surprise me, because part of my theory about the Marcion in the Bible is that if you just pick Luke, which he had some form of, it's very easy to show, as Thomas L. Brody does, that a lot of it is rewritten from the Old Testament. Now, Marcion rejected the Old Testament, so why was he even interested in this? Well, I think the answer is that you can like a lot of stuff in the Old Testament without wanting to be saddled with the whole thing, and that this was a way of smuggling back into the new thing some of what you liked in the old by rewriting it heavily but recognizably.
Is it kind of like Joseph Smith saying, well, we have the Book of Mormon, there is a Bible, but it just backs up what we're saying. We don't really go there. We don't really care. We're focused on this new thing.
Yeah,
Smith
except that Smith didn't repudiate the Bible.
Okay.
It is in the shadow, but that's still a good analogy.
Okay.
There was a dogmatic reason for Marcion to reject the Old Testament, but he probably, like I wrote an article once called, "Is the Bible Mein Kampf?" You're just a fool if you think the Bible is an evil book. And so Marcion didn't necessarily think the Old Testament was Mein Kampf. There must have been stuff he liked. In fact, in the Marcionite version of the epistles, there are Old Testament quotes. It just doesn't say where they're from. And that's the same sort of a thing going on. And you're not trying to exorcise the whole darn thing. Some of it's too good not to borrow. So I think you could have the first synoptic gospel being a Marcionite gospel, but there's too many other things going on I don't have command of currently to say.
Well, thank you so much for the super chat and your answer, Dr. Bob. We got another one from Alan Bird. Thank you, my friend. What did Dr. Bob think of John Robinson's work, especially his most famous book, Honest to God?
I really enjoyed that when I was on a kick of reading radical 60s theology. In fact, once when I was working for the Protestant Foundation, the ecumenical campus ministry of Montclair State, we had this nostalgia event, and it said 60s music, 60s theology. And so I gave some sort of a talk about it, and we were playing the 60s music in the background, loads of fun. But I read that, and I liked a lot of it, Bultmann, Bonhoeffer, and Tillich. He tries to synthesize them, and that's not that tough to do. I'm not as impressed with Bishop Spong's attempts to graft process theology onto Tillich.
Right.
But his predecessor, you might say, Bishop Robinson, that was pretty interesting, and I liked it. In fact, I would say that you could almost give that to somebody along with a copy of Lewis's Mere Christianity, and say, why don't you read both and see what you think? Because they're both very popularized, but very well done expressions of different types of theology. As a New Testament scholar, he did a lot of great work, but toward the end, he came out with what I think was really far-fetched, an attempt to say that all the New Testament documents were written before the fall of Jerusalem. And you have to argue some pretty contrived things to come to that. And I found it unconvincing. And he also wrote, I think his last book was about John, and he was trying to argue that this wasn't all that original. C.H. Dodd and A.M. Hunter had both written a lot on this, saying that, yeah, John is very different from the synoptics, but that might be because he was drawing on a different stream of oral tradition that didn't remember it quite the same way, but did preserve some distinctive themes. I just don't buy that, though, because if there were random selections of material, surely you would have Johannine-sounding stuff in the synoptics, and you don't. There's one passage people say is the Johannine thunderbolt, but I don't think in Q, but I don't buy it. George Ladd kind of thought that too. But he loved to outrage people by being very conservative in his critical conclusions about the New Testament and radical in his theology. He was a big process theologian. And he wrote an interesting book about eschatology from a process standpoint. He was certainly a brilliant and a major figure.
Thank you, Dr. Bob. Entertainment.com is the name. Says Joseph Smith, I think, did rewrite, fabricate passages of the Bible as part of his inspired translation, quote unquote.
Got a copy of it right there.
Nice. How does Polycarp compare to Smith in that way? And I wonder, which one is that book? Which one is it?
It's brown pseudo leather.
That's so it's brown?
No, I'm sorry, black.
This one, the Holy Scriptures inspired version?
Yeah, that's it.
Joseph Smith.
Yeah, it's. I think it's very similar. For instance, one outstanding interpolation into Luke that Polycarp must have added. You know, the wine and wineskins thing in Mark and Matthew, that no one pours new wine into old wineskins because he knows the new wine has not finished expanding in fermentation, but the old wineskin has already expanded as much as it can. And so when the new stuff finishes fermenting, kaboom! They don't explain all that, but that's what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, in Luke, they have that, so you shouldn't put new wine into old wineskins. But it adds, no one after tasting the old wine desires the new, for he says the old is good. I mean, obviously that's anti-Marcionite, and you wouldn't reject the vintage of the Old Testament because there's something new replaces it. It doesn't. And that has to be.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Let's see what he did with the beginning of John. I'm not that familiar.
Are you talking about Joseph Smith?
Yeah.
I wonder how much change he really made.
And this might be a good example.
I got another super chat after this one too. Good friend of mine. He may have known my father.
Good. The testimony of St. John, it says, in the beginning was the gospel preached through the Son, and the gospel was with the Son, and the Word was with... Oh, sorry, wait a minute. In the gospel was the Word, and the Word was with the Son, and the Son was with God, and the Son was of God. The same was in the beginning with God. So in him was the gospel, and the gospel was the light, and the life was the light of men. And the light shineth in the world, and the world perceiveth it not. And so there's, it's sort of verbose and doesn't really seem to add much, but that's not enough to go on.
No, I'm sure there's a bunch more he does. Well, thank you, Dr. Bob. Sky Daddy Mythbusters has a super chat. Matthew 27, 52 through 53, zombies. One of the most extraordinary claims in history. Not a single known eyewitness. All 4 canonical gospels are anonymous. Dr. Price, would you be interested in commenting on this particular idea? And yeah.
Matthew, in its present form, has hyped up the miracles. Think about what 1 Corinthians says. Jews seek signs, Greeks seek miracles, but we preach Christ crucified. No miracles, at least in connection with that. And look at the Gospel of Matthew. You got the veil of the temple torn. You got an earthquake. You got the darkening of the sun. The tombs open. This isn't what Paul thought happened. Mark is less extravagant than Matthew. He doesn't have the earthquake, I don't believe. He certainly doesn't have the zombies. And so it keeps getting heightened. As you go on, well, I think that the Jehovah's Witnesses are half right, and this is just a suspicion. They realize how absurd this sounds, and so they say, well, what it really means is that because of the earthquake, these cave tombs sprang open, which is not that tough to picture. The stone frames breaking, and the whatever slab was there fell over. That's easily imaginable. And that bodies were exposed, maybe even fell out of the things like you see happen in floods today. You look at the cemetery, oh my God, there's Uncle Bill over there. Horrible.
Uncle Buck, what are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, and they say that's what happened, and that their relatives thinking, oh no, I wonder how things went at the cemetery, and they go up, and sure enough, they recognize some of the people and have to rebury them. What a horror show.
Yeah.
Well, that's not exactly what it says happened, but it's strikingly close, and makes me suspect that that is what Matthew originally said, that the tombs were sprung open by the earthquake and dead bodies were exposed to the sight of onlookers, and that their loved ones came to see if they were there and did see them. And that it wouldn't have taken much of a change. That's good, but suppose they came alive again, and it wasn't that their relatives came out of the city to see them, but that the zombies went into the city and showed themselves. That doesn't take too much rewriting. So I have to think that may be what happened, because it's just so ridiculous. Otherwise, whereas this is entirely plausible.
You gotta stop. This is so funny, man. So, you either have floating corpses into Jerusalem.
Well, not all the way. All you would need is that they've been exposed on the hillside.
I know. I'm just saying, you got to come up with that kind of theory, or this is so whack and crazy, and people believe the whack and crazy.
Yeah.
Usually they just believe in the whack and crazy.
And it does say that now, but I just can't help thinking that Matthew, or one of the Matthean redactors, because there must have been at least a couple based on other odd things in the gospel, has decided this isn't spectacular enough. That's what he did with the earthquake, period. It wasn't in Mark.
Jeez.
So, I mean, to me, that the witnesses have done us a big favor. They are very close to what I think is the truth of the matter.
That matter, yeah. Well, Mr. Keeps On Ticking says, MythVision, will you make any more Mormon episodes with Bryce and David, maybe about the Utah years? I'm joining for my fix. Also, happy birthday, love you, and the great Dr. Bob. I just wanted to mention, I have up to episode 27 on the Patreon. It has not all been released on YouTube, so there's like 5 more episodes that have not been released. And we're going to be doing a live at some point, doing Q&A. We might do a few more episodes to tighten up some of the loose ends and things like that. But yeah, there's your answer. Stephen Music says, Nabatean King Aretas IV. Does Dr. Bob know how he died? His story seems similar to Christ. He was also betrayed by Judea or Judah. I don't know. Do you know?
No, I think I read something about this recently, but it was hardly anything. I suspect it was a reference to the same theory, but I'd like to know more about it.
Okay, so email me, Stefan, at derek@mythvisionpodcast.com. If you have any questions, or if you can give me some more insight to that, I would be happy to record that at some point. Thank you for the super chat for sure. Dr. Bob, we're going on 2 hours and 20 minutes. Maybe you do a plug for yourself, and then, of course, I'll out us with a plug. And by the way, for everybody watching, just so you know, I have been recording this whole time on high quality. So if your question, I've done this a lot too. If your question, for example, was super chatted or asked, and you had Dr. Bob actually, answer it, it's going to be in high quality content on the Patreon release. So if you were like, hey, I'm in history, I asked the question to Dr. Bob, and you want this to go down in high quality, and you want that to be like, hey, I'm going to snip this, I want to download this video and cut my little question out. It's all in high quality. So one day you can say to your grandkids or your great-grandkids, or you want to brag about it, you got it in high quality, because I like to do that. I don't want just a choppy phone quality at Dr. Bob's to be there. Anyway, give us a plug, a shameless one, like a really I don't care. I'm going to plug the hell out of myself right now, Dr. Bob. Just tell us something we need to know.
Oh, well, let's see. I have books coming out. Possibly the next one is Judaizing Jesus, due out on Amazon on the 1st of September. I have a couple of fiction anthologies that are in the works. One is called Secret Asia's Blackest Heart, where the stories are set in Asia or here, but under like Asian religious influence and stuff. It's great stuff by a lot of different writers. And another one called the Yig cycle, Yig being a snake god of Lovecraft's invention. And that's going to be a big one. I'm proofreading it now. It's over 400 pages of really good authors and good stuff. And I'm not sure, but when Gospels collide and merely Christianity, they shouldn't be too far in the future.
Well, we got a super chat once again. When red pops up, I'm a bull and I'm chasing it, right? Ricky Green, he's popped in before many times. And he says, I'm late, so I'm sorry. But he says, I always love these live. What was the purpose of the spurious gospels like the Gospel of Pontius Pilate, etc.? Were they just for pushing new agendas to believers, Dr. Price?
Well, that one was apparently an attempt to counteract an anti-Christian, or at least used by critics of Christianity, account called the Acts of Pilate. And the acta, actually, I guess in Latin, that was an official term for like court records or the file on so-and-so. Tertullian and Justin Martyr thought that there was because there had to be some official record, and you could go check it if you could find it, though they didn't claim to have seen it. But we're told that there was circulated something that was not by Christians. It purported to be the Acts of Pilate, but we don't have it anymore, and it was replaced by the Gospel of Nicodemus, also known as the Acts of Pilate. There are many different manuscripts of it, and that one is obviously very pro-Christian, though vestiges of the critical one seem to survive. Like in one place where it says Jesus healed somebody in the name of Asclepius. Well, that couldn't have been a Christian text. I got a...
What book was that, though? What book says that? Do you know? Do you remember? He healed somebody in the name of Asclepius.
The Acts of Pilate.
Okay.
And this was our friend Dave Allen, I believe, in an article of his in the Journal of Higher Criticism, where he shows that they must have built our Christian Acts of Pilate on the basis of this, but who knows what they censored.
Okay.
So that one was a kind of a cheap apologetic stunt. There have been other ones since then. The Arabic infancy gospel is interesting. That apparently was what certain Arab Christians believed. Who knows where they got the material anymore? The people that wrote the ones in Matthew and Luke. I mean, they got theirs out of the Bible or Josephus and rewrote them, but who knows where this came from. I think in that gospel it speaks about the magi that came to the manger being Zoroastrian magi or astrologers, which is mighty interesting because of the obvious Zoroastrian links with post-exilic Judaism and early Christianity. I'm sure the other infancy gospels were just attempts to satisfy curiosity. What was Jesus doing during those years? Of course, that wasn't a big issue if you were an adoptionist, right? The action really started at the baptism of the Jordan. He was filled with the Spirit and went out and did the miracles and such. But if you believed that you had to start saying, well, what was he doing during those times? It was like originally in the comics. Kal-El made his big public debut as Superman. But as the years went by, they decided to cash in and have the adventures of Superman when he was a boy, so Superboy. And then later still, they had him as an infant, Super Baby. And that's what happened. If you figured if Jesus was God from the beginning, he must have done divine things. In the Buddhist Gospels, they have stuff like that. That he gets right up out of the crib and starts preaching and so forth. I think Jesus does in one of the apocryphal infancy Gospels. The Nativity of Mary and some of those things were probably written in the interest of Marian piety to promote virginity and encretism and monasticism and stuff. 3 Corinthians, which eventually was incorporated into the Acts of Paul, they give a letter as from the Corinthians to Paul and then Paul's reply. And it's a way of getting Paul on record as explicitly repudiating Gnosticism and Docetism.
Right.
So it's obvious what was going on there. Boy, we wish Paul had addressed this. Let's say he did. In fact, I myself yielded to that temptation. I have a collection of 14 spurious Pauline writings, including an apocalypse.
In which book is that again?
It hasn't come out yet.
Okay.
It's going to be called Paul the Lost Epistles. So you now know what's in the epistles to the Alexandrians and the Silesians and the Antiocheans.
You're piecing together history that we know was there, but we don't have anymore, right?
Like if he wrote letters to them, what might he have said if he had addressed topics that we speculate about? What Paul thought about homosexuality, about the divinity of Christ. Why couldn't he have made it explicit? Well, now he did. And so it's like an experiment. Can I think through this issue the way I think the New Testament writer, Paul, would have. Just to see if it fits. So I really enjoy doing this, so you'll get a kick out of that. And hopefully I can hoodwink some people into thinking that it's real stuff. Let's see, how the heck did I get off on that?
Well, you're going off into the spurious.
Oh, yeah, right. The gospel according to the Hebrews, gospel according to the Nazarenes and the Ebionites, they just had some special, from what we know, some special material that fit their view, like if they were vegetarians. They have a statement where Jesus says, I have come to abolish... I've come to abolish the sacrifices, and if you do not cease from sacrificing, the wrath of my Father will not cease from you. Well, that's trying to promote Christian vegetarianism, which was very widespread in the ancient church. Jesus must have said it. So he did. And
a lot of modern Essenes, people who say they're Essenes who claim Jesus was an Essene too, they like to harp on that. Oh,
could have been.
Yeah,
it makes sense, but they seem to know. In fact, I ran into a woman in a used bookstore once who said she had been an Essene in a previous life.
Oh my God. Sounds like AJ. Or kind of like the Jesus from Australia. Anyway, yeah, no, I would love to see what the skeptics had to say, like all their writings. I wish we had them. Wonder what we know that we don't know.
Well, we do have Origen's Contra Celsum, or Against Celsus, which, even though it's just excerpts, it is a huge book you can pretty much reconstruct the original work from these big quote passages he gets. And another professor of mine, Gordon Conwell, the great David Scholler, said this is still a good book of Christian apologetics. And that's sort of true. The guy was a philosopher as well as a great scholar. And he does tell you stuff that Celsus was saying in the 2nd century about how Christians were sneaky in their evangelism and how they had made up these myths and that Jesus was a magician. It's really fascinating.
Wow.
And so we do have that.
Interesting. Thank you once again, Ricky, for such a large super chat, man. I really appreciate it. Michael Beeson, he writes, I like the inverse where Jesus is given credit for stuff that went down with Isis and Horus in some of the Coptic magic writings. Have you seen any of that stuff Dr. Bob?
Not enough to remember.
Michael, email me, man. Derek at MythVisionPodcast.com. I know Dr. Bob will love seeing stuff like that, but if it's in Coptic magic writings, then I could see something like that being a little later, but nonetheless interesting. And I'd like to see it myself. We got one more here, I think, or John Estes. I hope I'm saying that right. I'm not a believer, but I think everyone should read Raymond Brown and Joseph Fitzmyer before they read Outer Theories. Agree, Dr. Bob?
Well, they ought to read them. Both of them were great scholars, Roman Catholics, not particularly biased because of that. In fact, I think they would have gotten burned at the stake in an earlier century. Brown is just terrific. Sometimes I think he's fudging it, but very little, very infrequently. He was just brilliant. I had the great privilege of hearing him speak once. And Fitzmyer, I haven't. He is a real specialist in the Aramaic language, and has written books on the light that sheds on the Gospels and stuff. So read it before. I don't know if it would matter much, but I would say whatever intrigues you, you ought to read. But I would certainly advise reading those gents.
For sure.
Yeah.
Now he says before they read Outer Theories or Other Theories, I think. Read those two.
I was told that when I was a teenager by pious contemporaries. You better read this stuff first, which I did, and I don't regret it. But I'm a little suspicious that there's the idea of forewarned is forearmed, that this will influence you first. Whereas I think it would really be handy to approach it with as blank a slate as you can. So that, because there's the temptation of whatever you read second is going to sound, it's going to suffer by comparison with whatever you read first.
Right.
And so I don't know. I don't know that it really matters as long as you try to give a fair hearing, and you realize that the motivation for writing the thing doesn't make any difference.
Right.
Whether the person's an atheist, a cultist, a Catholic, it doesn't matter. You have to look at the argument and as well as you can evaluate it, and also keep in mind, just because it sounds strange or it's a minority opinion does not count against it.
Right.
Yeah.
Great point. Well said. Ladies and gentlemen, we've made it a whole 2.5 hours. This is amazing. With my phone, it's as hot as hell itself.
Uh-oh.
Like, it makes me worried, when this phone gets as hot. But I really do appreciate everybody. Let me turn this around for a second. And you probably won't be able to see me very well. No, look how shadowed I am. I'm so dark. All right, so I'm turning around. I'm going to come over there with Dr. Bob for a second. Let me come over here. So, Dr. Bob, you guys, look, I got this t-shirt. Future Myth Visionaries, my kids. I think I need to hook up on my Teespring. There is the Teespring, you guys. Go get the book. Go get the book Dr. Bob wrote. Also, go join our patrons. If you guys can help, if you guys are interested in joining, and what we're doing is constantly, trying to promote, if you will, public education.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, so you guys are actually helping us out to do what we're doing. Dr. Bob opens his doors to me. You haven't charged me to come and record for you. Yeah, and I know, but I respect your time and stuff. And so usually I would try. I try my best to obviously throw that to him. But if you guys find it in your heart, and you're able to help Dr. Bob and become a patron of what he does, look, I, as a follower of what he does and an admirer of his insight, ask you to help support Dr. Bob in any way possible. You guys have no clue. Your email is criticus@aol.com. I give that openly. I usually don't when it's other people, but if you guys want to set up a one-on-one with him also, there's an app where you can have a personal one-on-one. It's a Jimmy app, Jemi. You can set up with Dr. Bob and hang out with him yourself. I love you guys. I really do. And I'm so thankful that I get to do what I love doing, and that's learning from you and try to somehow let them live through this camera and the high-definition camera and learn from you, Dr. Bob. So I really do appreciate you guys. This man won't be here forever. I can tell you that much. And I'm trying to make history, and you guys are helping make that happen with my recordings and just helping with questions and stuff. So one day you won't be here, Dr. Bob, but
I know you're counting the days.
I'm not. I'm hoping that we can find the plant that Gilgamesh lost to the damn snake, and then we can actually feed it to you, and then you can just read every book in the world, and then you can tell us what it means.
Yeah.
Seriously, though, I love you guys, and I guess we'll end on the note. We
are
MythVision. I love you guys. Seriously, thank you so much for the super chats and everything. This was wonderful live. Really was. And I've got it recorded on high definition. Join my Patreon if you guys want early access to everything. There's hundreds of videos with Dr. Bob. No exaggeration. So, love you. Peace.